Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and I'm finally releasing my highly anticipated, highly requested Diablo tier list video. In this video, we're going to rank the villains of Diablo. The Season 17 tier list will come soon. Tier lists are a popular thing on YouTube these days, so I figured we'd have some fun with ranking some of our favorite and least favorite enemies throughout the Diablo series, using the very highly scientific method of gut feeling. So let's begin with Adria. So Adria the Witch, we first see her in Diablo 1, where she is an NPC vendor. She's kind of sketchy, but players largely forget about her. She does not appear in Diablo 2, and she reappears in Diablo 3. So what's going on with her story? Well, it turns out after Diablo 1, she made sweet, sweet love to the Dark Wanderer, who was basically Diablo, who was the warrior, the canonical victor of Diablo 1, got pregnant with Leah, had the baby, discarded the baby, then she comes back into the picture in Diablo 3, so she has this connection to Leah, a character important to us. She's integral to the storyline of Diablo 3. She eventually betrays us. It's a little twist in the story. She's very involved in the Soul Stone. She's very involved in making Leah become Diablo's vessel. She then disappears, and then in Reaper of Souls expansion, we get to fight her, and she transforms into this big ol' blood demon monster. So overall, I gotta rank Adria, who I believe is underrated, an A-tier villain. It's satisfying to see her journey. If you've played the original Diablo, it's a nice callback. She's present throughout the series. She's very important and integral to the story. You get that satisfying conclusion when you kill her. Some of the writing or the twists in Diablo 3 can be kind of weak, but overall, I think Adria is a solid A. Alright, on to Andariel. We're gonna rank Andariel a solid S tier. No further explanation needed. I'm sure many 12-year-old boys from the early 2000s would agree with me. Alright, next on to Archbishop Lazarus. Now, Lazarus appears as a villain in Diablo 1. It's a fairly significant fight, but the lore on Lazarus, or his tie-ins to the story, are kind of sparse. His lore is there. He's largely responsible for corrupting King Leoric. But as far as side villains go, his overall importance throughout gameplay, throughout the story, isn't all that great, so I'm going to put him into C tier. And as we go through these, I do encourage you folks to sound off in the comments with your thoughts on all these villains. Anything you agree, disagree with. Alright, next on to Azmodan, the Lord of Sin. Alright, we've heard whispers of Azmodan, Lord of Sin, and Belial, the Lord of Lies, from past Diablo lore, but we only see him for the first time in Diablo 3, and I am not impressed. Azmodan is supposed to be one of, if not the greatest military battlefield tactician of the Burning Hells, and he comes up with some pretty dumb strategies that are pretty easily vanquished by the Nephilim. We're seeing like Game of Thrones quality battlefield tactics here. Game of Thrones spoilers, folks. Everyone's dumb now. Just so stupid. Plus the dialogue they give him in Diablo 3, the way they're just constantly radioing in to gloat. I guess it's supposed to be because he's prideful, he's the Lord of Sin. It doesn't play off well when he's bragging and then saying, oh, I don't need my siege weapons which you have destroyed. I have my goons. Oh, you killed those guys too. I didn't need them either. I'm gonna just tell you my plan and then I'm done. He has that really cool scene in the cinematic with Leah. I think that's really the only redeeming factor about Azmodan. I don't know if I'm putting him in the D tier. Alright, on to Baal. Now, Baal, Diablo, and Mephisto, the three brothers, the three prime evils. Throughout Diablo 2, we first fight Mephisto, then we fight Diablo. In the meantime, we're getting cinematics. We learn about Baal. We learn that Tal Rasha was containing Baal within him. We learn that a doofus comes around and frees him. But we largely forget about Baal thanks to masterful storytelling. And there's that incredible cinematic, the ending of Diablo 2 before the expansion, where all this time throughout the cinematics, we think that Tyrael has been talking to our protagonist Marius. But it's the reveal at the end that it has been Baal in disguise this whole time, Everyone got blown away by that. A stunning reveal. Sets up the expansion masterfully. Baal is the villain. Who saw that coming? But it's not a twist that came out of nowhere. The signs were there. We could have figured it out, but we didn't because the storytelling was so good. Then we have that next cinematic going into Lord of Destruction with Baal destroying the barbarians. This is setting up a villain perfectly. We go into things gunning for Baal. Absolute S-tier villain here. All right, on to Belial. Now, Belial and Azmodan are two brothers. Azmodan is the best military strategist, and Belial, the Lord of Lies, is meant to be the best liar, the best deceiver of the Burning Hells. And his whole plot twist in Act 2 was obvious to everyone, including our character themselves is basically not even surprised, like, yeah, obviously the kid was Belial. Obviously the Child Emperor is the big bad guy this whole time. If these two are the best the Burning Hells have to offer, how dumb are the angels to have not been able to defeat these guys? I do have to give props where props are due. The fight with Belial is kind of cool, where he transforms into his Mega Man mode. That's a first in Diablo history. It was a very impressive fight. So by virtue of that, and by virtue of him not being as obnoxious as Azmodan, I'm putting him in the C tier. On to Bloodraven. Now, Bloodraven is the first meaningful mini-boss of Diablo 2. She's one of the corrupted rogues from the rogue encampment, and in fact, we learned behind the scenes that she was the rogue from Diablo 1. So that's a nice callback that definitely gives her some points. Bloodraven is the archetypical B-villain. She's not a main villain, she's a secondary villain in the story, but she has a little bit of lore, a little bit of story associated with her. She's cool, she has a cool name, she has a cool fight, she has a cool voice line, "Join my army of the dead." She's not a pushover villain, solid B tier. Now, speaking of B-villains, we have Cydaea, one of Azmodan's lieutenants, the Maiden of Lust. She's got a cool design, she's got cool voice lines, it's very thematic, she plays a relatively minor part in the story. She's voiced by Claudia Black, though, which is amazing, so solid B tier. Okay, on to Diablo himself. Diablo. Should we just come back to him? Let's come back to him. Skipping over to Duriel, whom you can probably not even recognize in this artwork. So Duriel is supposed to be the twin brother of Andariel. It's pretty obvious who got the looks. Now, the thing with Duriel, his fight in Diablo 2 is terrifying. You step through that portal, and then you are instantly in this tiny room with Slugman Pincer Arm, who is running at you super fast and slows you, and it is a panic-inducing fight. But he is a minor footnote in the story. We don't know anything about this guy. He's some weird slugman protecting the Tomb of Tal Rasha. He doesn't get proper voice lines or a proper battleground like Andariel. Literally the only thing memorable about him is that panic-inducing fight. I'm gonna have to put him C tier. Alright, on to Izual, Tyrael's old lieutenant, as Diablo is wont to repeat several times throughout Diablo 3. Oh, Izual. Okay, so it is cool that he is a fallen angel. In Diablo 2, he is a cool B-villain, he has that tragic backstory, but then the way he's introduced in Diablo 3 is just obnoxious. It's obvious and clear fan service and nothing else, and I don't have anything opposed to fan service intrinsically if it's done well. It was just really annoying how Diablo kept rubbing it in, like, hey, you guys notice this callback? This is Izual. Y'all remember Izual, right? I'm caught between B and C tier, but I'm gonna lean towards my D2 nostalgia and put him into B tier. All right, on to Maghda. F tier. Just no. No. Just no. Maghda is everything that's wrong with Diablo. Literally. Pick anything that you dislike about Diablo, and you can somehow tie it to Maghda. Deckard Cain died. Maghda. Cartoony graphics. Maghda is the poster child of the most cartoonish, butterfly, weirdo graphics in the game. Weak writing. Maghda plays such an important part in Diablo 3's story, and yet, tell me anything about her that you remember. She is... The only thing memorable about her is the bad stuff. Plus, she done my boy Cain wrong. Malthael. Okay, so Malthael is like Baal, but executed poorly. Malthael is MIA throughout all of Diablo 3. He is vaguely referenced, but he doesn't seem to be of particular importance. We maybe think, okay, he's possibly going to show up. We just know that the Archangel of Wisdom, because that's what he was before he became the Aspect of Death, has been missing in action. If you pay close attention to certain dialogue and certain lore, you can maybe pick up some clues, but he is in no way a part of the story of Diablo 3 up and until the expansion, where all of a sudden he's the main villain. I was perplexed by this because Diablo 3 was set up perfectly to have Imperius as the next main villain, the Archangel of Valor, whom we meet multiple times throughout Diablo 3, because it's good to introduce your villain early so that we meet him and become familiar with them and vilify them and then feel some satisfaction in fighting them. Imperius is important to the story of Diablo 3. He has a whole cinematic where he fights Diablo. He has these interesting motivations where he's not just a bad guy like the demons. He hates the demons, but he also hates humans. It's a nice twist. And his smugness and his arrogance and the way he talks down to us, the player character, we're just gunning to smack this guy in the face. So as I'm waiting for the reveal of the expansion, I'm just like, I can't wait to kill Imperius. And then we get Reaper of Souls announced, and we play the game, and we meet Imperius again, but we never fight him. And I was confused. I'm like, okay, I mean, Malthael's cool and all, but what was this whole setup? The whole story was pointing to Imperius, and then it's like this bait and switch, and nope, out of nowhere, Malthael, whom we have never met, whom we have no stakes in fighting. And if you go and look at the behind-the-scenes stuff, Imperius was meant to be the villain of Reaper of Souls. It was meant to be that Malthael was just a goon of Imperius. That Reaper of Souls cinematic, where Malthael is going for the Black Soul Stone, originally had Imperius there facing off against Duriel, and then they just couldn't get the story to work, so they wrote Imperius out, and they felt as well that having the two villains was diluting things too much. I don't know whether or not they made the right call, but I feel that Imperius would have been a much stronger villain. Malthael is cool. He absorbs the same motives of Imperius in that must destroy humans and demons, but we could have had a stronger villain. I'm going to put him in the B tier. All right, on to Mephisto. Okay, I love Mephisto, but I have to look at this objectively. I have to use some objective standards here. Mephisto is super cool, and he makes for a great boss fight, and his role in the three, he's technically the leader of the three. He's at least the smartest one, and we see him in the cinematics. He's got that really cool boss fight location in Diablo 2, but ultimately, his role isn't all that different than a B villain. If you dig into the lore, there's a lot of richness there. There's a lot that's going on. This is a character that could have been brought back multiple times, that could have a lot built around him, but I guess just looking at how he was actually used, I'm a little torn between, like, maybe high B tier, lower A tier. Like, his role was far less significant than Adria's, and I just think if we're giving Malthael a B tier, we gotta give Mephisto a B tier too. I'm sorry. Alright, on to King Leoric, the Skeleton King. Man, King Leoric has this whole... It could be an entire story unto itself. It's a tragedy. King Leoric, a hero, a good king, a good man, slowly corrupted, perverted by Diablo's influence, and the whisperings of his grima worm-tongue advisor Lazarus. We follow his descent into madness if you explore the lore, and as well there's little scenes where you can find this out. There's this wonderful scene in Diablo 3. If you enter the right room right before going down to the crypts, I think, you see a reenactment of the ghosts of the moment where he actually beheads his own wife. He's completely become the Mad King at this point. And then eventually his own lieutenant, Lackdanon, has to be the one to kill him. And it pains him because he knows this isn't my king, this isn't the man I once knew. And then as if the tragedy wasn't enough there, then Diablo's like, yeah, I'm not done with you. Brings him back as the Skeleton King, now fully in control of him, to swarm Tristram with his army of the dead, and then bam, he's brought back again in Diablo 3, makes for a great minor boss. He's a little over the top in Diablo 3, but Diablo 3's storytelling and acting isn't its strengths. Still though, overall, I gotta give the Skeleton King a solid A. Alright, on to the Butcher. Now, I almost want to rank the Diablo 1 and the Diablo 3 Butcher completely separately, but I can't. We gotta give fairness here. In Diablo 1, on the second level, you open a door. You see bloodstains leading to a door. You're like, what's this room? There's these weird bloodstains leading into and out of it. You open the door, and there he is. And there he's coming for you, and then he says the fresh meat line, and you are terrified. And he's this fast little demon dude with a big ol' axe. Well, he's not little. He's little on your screen, but he's big. And it's terrifying. It is unexpected. And even without any real lore around it, it is so memorable. It is one of the most memorable moments, if not the most memorable moment, from Diablo 1. And then Diablo 2 parallels it with the Smith. I didn't put the Smith as a separate category, but let's group the Smith in with there, because the Smith was basically just a callback to the Butcher, which was almost as strong. And then in Diablo 3... oh man, Diablo 3's Butcher. He is introduced by Maghda like she is an announcer introducing a UFC fighter. And in the blue trunks, we have the Butcher! It is so cringy and just... it removes every element of what made the Butcher fight so memorable and scary. That it was so sudden and unexpected, or rather, it had that build-up of the suspense of like, okay, I see these bloodstains, but you didn't know what was going to happen. Here, we have this cutscene, we have a fixed terrain, and we're like, okay, it's the Butcher, cool. It's a nice callback, it's nice fan service, but it's not executed well. They even give him some dumb voice lines in Diablo 3. Like, what does he say? Meat good, vegetable bad? It just kills the fear factor. I have to look at the overall journey. I want to put, like, Diablo 3's Butcher in D tier, Diablo 1 maybe A tier, but I have to consider them as one. I'm gonna average it out to C tier, because the Diablo 3 version is the last impression that we got, just sullied the memory. Alright, on to the Summoner. Now, similar to Bloodraven, the Summoner was actually the sorcerer from Diablo 1. His battlefield is super cool. That's when you go to the Arcane Sanctuary. I think that's really the most impressive thing about the Summoner. Overall, he's, as a character himself, less cool than Bloodraven. He himself is less memorable, but he is so tied to the Arcane Sanctuary, which is one of the most memorable locations in all of Diablo, that I'll put him in maybe a lower B tier. Alright, on to Zoltun Kulle. Okay, Zoltun Kulle is a really interesting character. There's pros and cons. Okay, the pros. He is important to the lore and story and plot of Diablo 3. He created the Black Soul Stone. He plays a very integral role in the narrative. He's with your character a lot. He has interesting motivations. He is at first an ally, but he's always kind of sketchy, but you can sort of empathize with him, you could understand. He's largely a believable character, but then you have... I feel like there must have been two completely different teams working on writing and casting, where the writers put together the most complex villain, the most nuanced villain in all of Diablo history, but then the casting director was like, we gotta make him seem like an over-the-top cartoon villain. Now let me clarify, the acting is fantastic. It's Stephen Bloom, he's an amazing voice actor. But the direction he was given, with this mad cackling, he is an absolute mustache-twirling villain. There was so much potential with this character, and that's what's upsetting. He could have easily been A, if not S tier levels, but I'm gonna have to put him in B tier. Alright, on to Diablo himself. Okay. Diablo 1 Diablo and Diablo 2 Diablo. In both cases, you only meet them at the end. While in fairness, I guess in Diablo 2 you do see his progression from the Dark Wanderer, which is really cool. So Diablo 2 is an upgrade over Diablo 1's Diablo. but really everything is a build-up. We know we're going to fight Diablo. It's okay that they don't introduce him early and often as a character, because we know from the start, this is our whole purpose. Everything is about Diablo. Everyone's always talking about Diablo. There's no surprise that he's going to be the villain at the end. The entire game is leading up to it. And when he pops up in Diablo 1, the way it happens, it's epic, it's scary. In Diablo 2, it is epic squared, opening up those seals and then the screen shake, and then he spawns and his voice line. Amazing fight. And we also get the cinematic, seeing the transformation from the Dark Wanderer into Diablo. Complete S tier levels. Then we have Diablo 3. So I don't hate everything about Diablo 3's Diablo. I am totally cool with it being Leah that became Diablo. I think that was cool. I like the twist that the more feminine shape was because of the more feminine host. It also retroactively explains Diablo 1 Diablo versus Diablo 2 Diablo. Diablo 2 Diablo was bigger and bulkier. Why? Diablo 1 Diablo's host was a boy. Diablo 2 Diablo's host was a warrior man. Really, the only thing that I dislike about Diablo 3 Diablo is the dialogue. One of the game's weakest aspects. Some cringeworthy, cheesy dialogue and voice lines, and falling right into that whole Azmodan syndrome. And it's strange, it's because it feels like that the writers were trying to follow the advice of, well, let's introduce our villain early and often to lead up to the final fight, to get the players to hate this character, vilify them, make that fight satisfying and built up to. The whole game is building up to it. You don't have to. It's okay. It worked perfectly in Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. We know we're fighting Diablo at the end. By making Diablo talk to us, we're making Diablo seem less important. In Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, it felt like Diablo didn't even care about us. He is so above us that it is beneath him to bother acknowledging our presence. Now we have the prime evil, not even just Diablo, the prime evil, taunting us. I guess in fairness, it's because we've defeated all of his other incarnations, so okay, whatever. But overall, I'm going to give it an A tier because he wasn't completely ruined, and we wouldn't have the Diablo franchise without Diablo himself. And that's going to wrap up this tier list, but do sound off in the comments with your picks. Who would you move into what tier and why? Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and now YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider supporting on Patreon or YouTube and unlocking behind-the-scenes content. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more gaming content.